Recording.
Everybody, thank you so much for attending. And again, attending, we just mean me and Chris, but for a future reference, there might be somebody else that watches this accidentally, and they're probably trying to look for something like highlights of Peyton Manning or something like that. And they're like, what is this? Accidents happen, right? Or like an autoplay feature, like they go to sleep and leave their YouTube on, it like kicks us on
Right.
that.
So
So
wake up and you're like,
for
what
those
is it?
people who are just waking up to us randomly and not knowing what this is, before you click off, welcome back to Manning Up. And we are Christopher Allen Ball, and I am Ian McBain. And we last week, I think, talked about some of the challenges that come from waiting on kind of what God's plan is for our lives. Me personally, going through a job transition, finishing and wrapping that up actually this week. We have a lot of success that, and God has obviously opened the door in a big way for me. So I can kind of speak to that real quick, Chris, if that's okay, and then we can kind of run through some things. Sound good?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So yeah, some extra highlights a little bit for me. We did finally decide, it was down to a few, but we decided to jump board with one great opportunity, and very excited for that. While it took about 3 weeks or so to kind of get the groove right, and there was definitely tons of challenges, which we talked about in the last conversation. It's really nice to be at the end of it. And I kind of thought that I would be like, once we signed and everything, I'd give that big sigh of relief and like the world would look a little bit brighter and everything. But it was really just another day. And I think that's probably a good thing that it didn't have this huge like change in my mind, but it was kind of like a fulfillment. Like you just kind of were like, it was what was expected. Was there times during that where I had moments of doubt and frustration? Absolutely. And we could talk about those. But it was just nice. It's nice now to be on the other side of it, and kind of the excitement of starting a new chapter. And just kind of like, like God came off of the bench for a second and he ran a couple big plays and then came off the field, and I got to like give him an attaboy on the butt and be like, yeah, I knew you were gonna do that. So thanks for the help, buddy. So it's it really is cool to see God's plan for us, and I'm just excited to see what kind of blessings he has this year, but couldn't be more excited with the opportunity. Uh, I can honestly say throughout the interview process, there was so many different lanes I could go in technology. And he kind of found one that I hadn't known that I wanted to do, but it wasn't like the first thought I had, but I was glad it was his thought, because I'm actually really excited for the avenue, and it makes a lot more sense given my background. So enough about me, but really excited to kind of see God just coming through. I knew he would, but now I'm on the tail end of it, and I can kind of start reaping the benefits of some of this, faithfulness.
Well, thanks for sharing. And it's worth acknowledging. There is an emotional toll in waiting. We get stuck sometimes feeling like we're lost or forgotten even. The real thing is that waiting is hard. It's difficult. But things to remember are, maybe it's God preparing us for the next season, the next chapter. Yeah. I think there's stories in the Bible where people waited years, with Joseph.
Long time.
13 years.
Think about Daniel, right? Waiting for Saul, and even had moments where he could have taken Saul's life and rushed God's process, but he chose to be a committed man. And but there was a lot of waiting, and he had already slain the giant. People wanted him, and yet he had to wait for God's time to be right. And then I think of also like Moses too. Like, I don't know the Old Testament that well. Yeah. I think you and I would both agree we're more like Gospels forward type guys on the most end, but like it's funny that we're thinking about this when it comes to waiting. But like, I'm pretty sure Moses, like there was like a couple of times where it was like a 40-year moment before he went back to Egypt, I think. And then it was, and somebody can correct us who knows this stuff better, but a hell of a lot of waiting with that. And then 40 years at least, right, before they got to take the promised land. So I didn't have to march in a desert for 40 years, right? Like, there are worse things.
We have a God that knows us by name, and we don't have to feel forgotten. It can be difficult, but things to do. Put your faith in action. So trust in God's plan for yourself. Work on the things. Partner with God in those things to kind of keep moving forward. Don't just sit around waiting. You're like, God's got me. It'll get better, right? Yep. I know he's got you, in his hands to take care of you. But put that faith in action, and things will get better. You'll get through it. But
yeah, and I think it's fair to say too, like and you and I kind of touched on this in a conversation yesterday, but just you do have a human reaction to rejection, right? Like there was a few different times when I would go to the final rounds of interviews, meet with the CEOs and everything. Even those conversations went extremely well. Like I'd walk out of them being like, all right, yeah, like I'll get my plane ticket booked and we'll head up to meet y'all. And then you'd get like a random reason why, like, well, one other candidate beat you out by a nose, but it wasn't much. You know, we'd like to keep you in line for, you know, another open door. But in this market, there was, you know, couple times when I faced some heavy rejection, and there's plenty to unpack with that that I tried to today. But I kind of imagine it in this way, like, you know, we both have daughters, and it kind of comes down to this idea of like when they face rejection, or what would we do? And we would just want to give them a big hug. We would know that they went through it and they're going to still be going through it because there's a human reaction, but we would just want to like hug them. And I think that's what God kind of had in mind for those moments. He's like, he didn't want to see me be in pain, but that was a human reaction to something. And he wanted me to be faithful and not be fearful, but he still was there for a hug when I needed it. Because those were tough times. Rejection's a real thing. And I think going through that is really tough because you have to pull your, you know, the human element. You can't be afraid to acknowledge the fact that we're humans. Like I think Christians sometimes are like, there are the Christians who are like, will immediately will hit you with like, well, it's in God's hands, it's gonna be okay. And like you're like, hey, my like grandpa just died like 2 minutes ago. I get that it's gonna be okay, but I need like a moment or two to be a little upset. Like, well, I get it. But
there's some. I mean, if you would just apply it to the business world, it's tough to grow when you're comfortable, right? So getting uncomfortable, not feeling like everything is perfect, you know, in your life right now, there's room to grow in that, and usually people won't just sit still through that. You know, they want to do something, and you know, partnering with God in that plan to keep moving is a nice opportunity for growth in your faith and everything else for your family, you know, for yourself. So
yeah, and I like the growth mentality too, that you have to be a little uncomfortable for good things to happen. I think that's very true in everything that we do. And you and I are both into modalities and trying to like take care of our bodies. And we're in the season of life where it's less about like powerlifting and more like, how are we going to keep these things going for a while? And it's so interesting when you think about like saunas and cold plunges. The reason why they're effective, amongst many reasons, we won't go into all the details. We're not selling cold plunges today. But is that you're making the body extremely uncomfortable. So I know with the sauna, like you get in there and a lot of your bad cells get pushed out, your immune system jumps up because the body is reacting to what it feels like is a stressful situation. Whereas if you become complacent and stay in the same weather, same comfortability, like your immune system drops actually. So it has less defense because it feels comfortable. So it's constantly keeping your body in a state of like, you know, fight or flight, which actually lets you live longer. Certain parts of your body, I should say. We don't want to pretend like we're medical professionals, but I think it applies to for a lot of things. When you're a little bit uncomfortable, sometimes that's just the way growth happens, or maybe that's all the time that growth happens that way.
And it's kind of nice to see the master design and everything, and God's design with science and what we learn and what we don't even know and how we could understand. Hold that thought. My dog wanted to go outside, so
Puppy's got to pee. Puppy's got to pee.
There you go.
Well, I know you and I talked about this a little bit too, and thinking about conversations to have on this, and we didn't really get a chance to really talk about it in full detail. But during the month where, you know, I was, you know, trying to figure out what the next move was, we had a bunch of other uncomfortable things happen. We had a cancer scare within the family that turned out to be completely benign, thank God. We had, you know, both kids in and out of flu, ear infections, strep. I mean, all of this in that exact, you know, 3.5 week period, right? So it was just constant stress. And you and I talked about this, and I think it's worth mentioning both now, and we'll probably touch on it a lot in these conversations. Is really just like your kids have you and they have your mom. We're talking about in the typical situation, and obviously families are different. There's different variations of it, but the kids have usually a resource or two. Your wife, if you're doing things right as a husband, has you. and maybe some friends, but definitely has you. And then, we obviously have some friends, but guys, it's even tougher in that arena. But usually it's just us. Like when stressful situations happen, especially if it affects the people in our family, like my wife or my kids, it's like they can always lean on me, but in that moment, they don't have really the strength necessarily. They probably do. I'm not giving them credit, but like they don't have right now the mentality of taking care of my emotions and my feelings in this, especially because the stereotypical man doesn't have any of those things, right? We just put on cowboy hats, jump on the horse, and come back every day and fix our bullet holes and get back to sleep, right?
Yeah, rub some dirt on it.
Yeah, rub some dirt on it. Like those are the cultural phenomena. So like there was times when I was going through that, I just felt so alone. And luckily, I mean, we talked, and obviously my wife was there for me if I needed it, but I felt like she had her own race to run. So I almost felt like my subsequent emotions all being, real and needed to be validated and probably like spoken out into the light. They weren't as important as what she was going through. So there's a lot of just feelings of isolation during that. I think a lot of guys carry that especially if they're like a single provider for a family or something like that, like the weight of it all. And it's not necessarily discussed or mentioned. People always talk about how hard it is to be a mom. And don't get me wrong, we're not trying to get slapped on this thing. We know how hard it is to be a mom and to take care of things, especially if you're a single mom who's also working a job, right? Like, but there's also on the male side, there's plenty of stress and challenges that can come up with either being a major provider, the sole provider, or even just the masculine figure that has to kind of hold down the ship, right? You've probably faced some situations like that. What are your thoughts on kind of keeping the weight and where do you go to kind of release that?
Well, that's it. It's the weight of those expectations. So for myself, I do find myself kind of shielding those from my family a bit, right? So they don't have to see all the things that I carry, maybe, right? And they shouldn't have to, so when I need to, I'll lean in and help wife help me carry the weight. Where do I go to do that? I don't know. I call you usually, but it's nice to have somebody to just talk with and get through things with and get some perspective and some feedback. And when you have somebody that shares the faith and, is able to give, not necessarily always give advice, but just reaffirm, what you meant a little bit and, understand things when sometimes it's nice to say them out loud just so that, it's a little better understood. But from a young age, I think there's the expectation that you go to school, you get a job, you buy a house, you get married. There's a thing to do, a process. You take care of your family, you raise your kids, and when you're an old man, you can retire and maybe do some woodworking or something you've always wanted to do on your own, right?
There's a process flow, right? Yeah.
Living I think there's. Well, for one, I never did things in that order. I did everything backwards and kind of like
with the woodworking and the retirement, and then moved into
not always by choice. But I think what you want to avoid is getting trapped by those things, right? Mm-hmm. You do want to live a life that has like you on a path for what your goals in life are and what you want to do. You still need to be there for the family and kind of your wife and everybody that's on your path, but don't get trapped by everything. So I don't know. So keeping a mentality about it helps.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I'm trying to figure this out too, and this is live and raw here, but what is the balance, or like what do you think could be the balance? Because like let's put the cancer scare moment just out there for a second. Like I needed to kind of keep it together so that it didn't seem as scary to the person who was going through it, because it was very scary for them. And if I was scared in that, it's like you're a good leader, right? A good leader understands how to read the room and say, okay, like they're not afraid enough. I need to give them some reality here so that this doesn't come as a shock. But on the other hand, too, if they're extremely fearful, Jesus in the boat, ye of little faith, what are y'all freaking out about it? Literally, it's just a little water. Like we're in the water. It's fine, guys. Like chill out. But it's it's taking courage in those moments, but also what is the balance, right? Because there is a strength to showing your kids and showing your family that your dad's not a robot, that he has emotions, he'll fail, he'll
Yeah.
hurt, he'll have things can hurt him, things can affect him. But then, especially the dad of two little girls, there is a certain level of like that has to be in balance. If daddy's crying all the time, if daddy can't get up and do his job, if daddy can't like handle things or like be a rock for his wife, then I'm setting them up for failure too, because they're gonna go looking for that in their relationships, and I don't want that. I want them to have a meek person, but I want them to also have. We're in America, right? I want them to have the strong, providing man, which is, So what is that balance? I think, or what balance do you think you have to take in that, and where do you feel like it's good to show emotions?
So, it's I don't know how to say it. It's not like a broad stroke where you can just be like, here's the balance, right? It's being responsible and not being trapped. You think of those things, you know how it's going to affect your family, and you do have those responsibilities still, but you don't want to feel like you're trapped in doing things because there's no other option, right? I mean, you do have options. You do know how to adjust the path when needed to make sure that the job's still getting done, your responsibilities are still being met, but you can still do what you need to do. So,
it's always being a guy is always challenging, especially because we're trying to do it right. And I think one of the things we're going to talk about in this more and more, and it'll be just a major topic of is parenting, is being a good husband in a world where that can be a challenge, and sometimes in a very like public and very commercial way, there are opportunities that are trying to rip us from doing specifically that. Like there's so many shows where affairs are like the highlight of it, and it's just a normal way of life for guys, or there's different things where the hero is like the James Bond figure, just doesn't care whether they're married. Or I think in one of the James Bonds, like I used to love it back in the day, but he was like, you're not my type. She's like, what do you mean? He's like single, like she was too available for him. So like, how do we as guys try to like compartmentalize pushing away what's commercial, pushing away, and then doing the right thing as we know it according to like what Jesus would want us to do? And I know Jesus didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about like, this is how a man should be, and this is how a husband should be, and this is how you raise your kids. There wasn't a ton of parent talk from Jesus, but he did teach us how to be the right human side of things, and he did exemplify what it meant to be a leader in situations. So I guess we're just trying to do our best, and we're gonna run into a whole bunch of hacksaws every once in a while and mess up, and we just kind of figure out a way to keep running through that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Is if you take a role model like Jesus and try to live like he lived, then you're on the right track for one. And with so many societal pressures and like what is normalized in today, outside influences, stop and think, what would you do or could you do if nobody else's opinion mattered? It's like you see your path in front of you, you're trying to walk the Christian life, and we all make mistakes on that path, I'm sure. I know I do. So when you're trying to do it, don't worry about everybody else, what they're thinking, right? Just consider what you're looking to do to get it. You only get the one life, right? So live to make that path to success and work towards it.
Yeah, there's a trying to look it up right now, and again, I kind of started this thing like we're not chapter and verse guys, but like I keep going back to them. But I think I'm looking it up now. It might be Matthew, but in a sense, really, it was just the conversation was like walking the Christian route is not going to be the big sidewalk that everybody's on. It is really going to be the thinner sidewalk that is more challenging and more isolating, and not in a bad way, but there is I think a lot of what we've been talking about echoes this idea that you do need to have people in your corner as a guy, and you do need to attach yourself to, like, if you can, if it's available in your area, but small groups or mentors or a best friend that you can at least bounce and do life with, because as a man, we're going to go through these challenges. We're going to have temptations. Like I would love for a friend to call me in the middle of the night and be like, hey man, I'm on a business trip right now. and I've had a few drinks, and I was just invited back to this hotel room. Tell me, like, remind me why I need to go back to my own room, right? Like, I would love for one of my buddies to call me up and do that. And not because like I would be happy that they're in that situation, but I'd be happy that they're making a phone call to somebody to gauge what they should do. And I'd be thankful they called me, because I'm not going to be like, here you go. And I'm like, it's going to
be like,
like,
congratulations.
Hey, remember, like,
second of all, just go back to your room. Yeah.
I know LeBron James is extremely boring, but he's playing right now. Go be bored. Like, it's
I always thought about it this way. If I have a problem with my woman at home, then the last thing I need is another woman in my life.
Nobody needs, I
got two problems.
That's always the joke. It's always a joke that my wife is like, oh yeah, you're gonna go get, like, she'll be, and this is a joke, everyone, but she'll be like, you need to go get another girlfriend. But like, honey, the last thing I need is another girlfriend.
No, but that is go to say, like, it's funny when we laugh about it because we're guys, I guess, but just
never ever
surrounding yourself with the right people makes a big difference in how well you're gonna do and who you can call when you might be off that path a little bit. So do yourself a service and surround yourself with people that kind of put you towards that goal you have in life, the way you want to live for yourself. So
I think that was perfect. I think I appreciate this conversation, just because I think it's important. I think it's going to be the Peter. It's going to be the rock in which we kind of launch this thing on. It's just that sense of like, hey, we're going to try to do it right. We're going to be husbands. We're going to be fathers. We're going to make mistakes. We want to surround ourselves with good people, and life isn't easy, but we should all embrace it. And I always joke that life really is easy. We just have to have the right lens on. But there are days when you can't put the right lens on, and it is hard. So I want to make sure we focus on the things that are easy and hard. And also, a lot of these conversations will be celebratory too. Like, we'll be celebrating, a lot of what we've experienced, like this whole experience that I just went through. We celebrated, God throughout the entire thing. And First Peter talks about, making sure you're doing that even in the low times. Celebrate because you're as close as Jesus as you can be when he went through his suffering. And I think there's a lot of truth in just being able to have somebody nearby, reach out to them when you need it, try to be the best you can, and even in the moments where it hurts, just remember, like, a little bit of frustration or a little bit of uncomfortable aspects of life, it means you're growing. So this was awesome, man. I appreciate the call today, and this was a good one, and look forward to chatting. I guess the next topic's on me, so we've got to figure this thing out.
Back to you. I got something I wanted to finish with. I got to look it up though, because while we were talking, I just thought of it, and I was like,
final thought, Chris.
So I had something, and I saved it specifically for this. Apparently, let me find where it is.
See, that's the problem. You didn't just ad hoc this thing. You tried to prepare.
No. I didn't know this was going to come up. I saved this like a couple years ago.
There you go.
And it just applies to this, but that's why I saved it. I guess I needed to apply to something. So this Bible verse thing, 2 Timothy 3-7, if anybody knows it. God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power and love and self-control. So I think that really plays into the whole conversation we just had. Is we're not meant to be timid. God gave us the spirit of power and love and self-control. So be responsible, not trapped, and live your life. It's the one you get.
I love it. And I love that you use Timothy too. Paul's conversations and letters can sometimes just be lost on people, but they are letters to other guys who are trying to lead. So it's a really interesting way of looking at, like, they all were going through different unique challenges geographically and with the political sects that they were into. But it was very, very interesting that his letters all kind of exemplify these different points as guys that we need to lean into. So it's maybe the Bible was written in very much a way for guys, right? So
amazing.
By the way, I hope this is actually in the video, but your light is the way it shoots, it looks very profound, like an angel is right, like Gabriel's just like, got you. But also there's a rainbow effect coming from it on my end. I hope that's in there, because that's just, like, I'm not gonna lie, mine's not making rainbows. Like, that's some baller shit right there.
Well, I'll tell you
Good.
the secret about that.
Until we talk next week, I'm excited, man. I'll chat with you soon, brother.
All
Thanks,
right, later,
everybody.
man. Get you
Later.
later. Peace.